Bro, what if I told you Azeroth was flat? Seriously, bro. Do your own research and look at all the evidence. Have you ever seen the Azeroth's curve? I mean, think about it, man. They say the curve is, whatever they say, 8 inches per mile squared. Well, if that's the case, how come I can see Sargeras' sword from Orgrimmar? I'm half a world away. Where's the curve, bro?
I am joking, of course, but he is actually making a compelling case for once. One of the other major topics I watch a lot on YouTube is flat earth debunkers, and though the theory is so ridiculous it doesn't really need that much debunking, it's still very entertaining to watch someone rip into them. I realize there's probably not a huge intersection between people who are into that and Warcraft players, but who are the majority of my viewers, but it is a thing that I noticed some time ago while making another video. Azeroth, as presented in World of WarCraft, behaves like what an actually flat world would. Now, the quote-unquote real Azeroth isn't flat. We've seen it from space.
It's CGI, bro. It's fisheye lens, whatever they call it.
We've seen it rotating, rather rapidly too, unless it was the Vindicar that was rolling around it so fast. Then the lightning on the surface should have changed. Oh, hell, man.
It's CGI. It's CGI.
Are those fun inconsistencies between what Azeroth is supposed to be, an actual round planet that isn't tiny and barely bigger than the island of Manhattan, can of course in reality be blamed on two things: the scaled representation of the real world in the video game, and simply on writers being inconsistent about it. But when you dig into it, and you watched as many flat earth debunking videos as I did, these inconsistencies start sounding familiar. Now, the picture you should be seeing right now is what most present-day flat earthers claim to believe in. They claim the Earth is a stationary flat disk with the sun and the moon as spotlights circling above it. There are several problems with this model and how it's inconsistent with real-world observations. Now, there's far smarter people with far more expertise in this than me that totally debunk this. But for the purpose of this video, I will give you some very brief explanations. If the sun was circling above the Earth like this, it would be visible at all times from the whole world. There's no two ways about this. Even if it was a spotlight shining only over a certain small area of the Earth, you'd still be able to see it as a light in the distance on the dark sky, just like you can see a street lamp even when you're not standing under it. The sun also seems to make some really strange shapes over the proposed flat Earth map during the northern hemisphere summer, when its light appears to wrap around Antarctica while leaving a circular area in the shade. And how would even lunar eclipses ever happen in this model? The Earth can never cast a shadow on the moon if both the sun and the moon are always above it. To see what a flat world would actually look like, that's more consistent with the observations we actually see, we need to look into the flat Earth models of our ancient ancestors had. People had once believed that the sun and the moon traveled over the dome of the sky during the day and then either rested during the night or actually traveled under the Earth. You probably still can't really get a lunar eclipse from this, but at least the sun in this model would actually rise and set. What is still inconsistent with observations is that it would rise and set at the same time all over the world. Now, what do you see when you look at the Azeroth presented in-game? At 5:30 AM server time, no matter where you are on Azeroth or even Outland, the sun will rise. At 9 PM server time, the sun will set. Every day, at the same time, all over the world. Now, if the sun really was circling a flat disk, this is exactly what you would see. There would be no time zones, no seasons, everything would be identical all the time. And to the best of my knowledge, there are no eclipses, solar or lunar, which is also consistent with the flat world model. Lore-wise, there's supposed to be eclipses because there's spells called eclipse and the druid resource called eclipse, so it's supposed to happen lore-wise, but again, the representation in the game isn't consistent with what the lore is supposed to be, so we do not ever witness any eclipses in the game. At least no naturally occurring eclipse because there was one in the quest, but again, low representation. There are no moon phases either. Azeroth's 2 moons always look exactly the same. On real Earth, the moon phases come from different ways. The sun highlights the moon as it slowly, 28 days per cycle, makes its way around the Earth, facing the Earth with the same side, but changing the facing towards the sun. On a modern flat Earth model, the moon's lighting would change throughout the day because its relative position towards the sun would change over hours, not weeks. In an ancient flat Earth model, it would likely be consistently illuminated the whole time, much like the moons of Azeroth. Like I jokingly said in the beginning, there is very evidently no curve to the game world. You can see very, very distant things across the world. If you look at the view of Azeroth from the Vindikar, Orgrimmar and Silithus should be thousands of miles apart. It doesn't matter how big the sword in Silithus was, the planet's curvature, evident in the very same view, would cover the sword up. And it would evidently cover the mountains and trees you can see between here and there. That is, of course, because the in-game maps actually are flat. There is no curvature there, nor is it simulated in any way. It used to be far less apparent when the view distance wasn't so astronomical or we had much worse computers. We could only see a few steps ahead, and it kind of preserved the sense of scale of the world. When you see something that distant, it kind of dispels a little bit of the illusion. There is no real good solution here other than arbitrarily limiting the view distance, be it by designers or by players themselves. However, it does show you a good example of an actual flat world. If the Earth was really flat, you would be able to see the equivalents of such distant locations. You would be able to stand on a skyscraper in New York and look out across the sea, and if you zoomed far enough, you would be able to see Mount Everest or Burj Khalifa, provided nothing else stood in the way. At the very least, you would be able to see the shores of Europe or West Africa. Modern flat earthers blame a variety of things on this, such as atmospheric haze or perspective. There are ways around it. If you zoomed far enough with good enough equipment, you would be able to make those colossally distant observations. Needless to say, on Earth you can't. In World of WarCraft, you can. And that is what you would be able to see on an actual flat world. One last thing that really betrays that in-game Azeroth is flat is the map. If you were hanging around world-building forums and sites and subreddits as long as I have, or just general cartography and map making, you would know about map projections. One problem with living on a globe is that you can't make a perfectly accurate flat map of your world. You can't perfectly plot a sphere's surface onto a flat map, and you have to make some kind of compromises. That's where you get types of projections that preserve either shape or distance or area, because you can't keep all three. Now look at the in-game map in WoW. It represents the area present in the game perfectly. That's of course because the area in the game is flat and not spherical, and the map was drawn over the minimaps and such. Still, shape, distance, area, everything is perfectly preserved just as it would be on the flat world. And it actually caused me a minor headache when trying to make my own map for my own Warcraft reboot for my TTRPG. If I kept the shapes from the lore maps of Azeroth, I would have had to decide what kind of projection it is. In the end, I didn't really decide and kind of ignored that aspect. I imagine that the real Azeroth in my game, this map isn't perfectly accurate to some degree. I just haven't stated what that degree exactly is. When I had a little more freedom with the geography, I made maps that were more accurate in that way. When I was making a map of Abir from the Forgotten Realms, according to the Greenwood's lore and his own video on the topic, a map that he himself approved of on his Discord server, I could do it with an actual projection, and one of my favorite ones, the Natural Earth projection, which makes a little bit of a compromise in everything to give me a map that looks the most right to my eyes. When I was making a map of an actual flat world, that also started in large part as a design exercise of what that would actually look like. I didn't have to think of any map projections. The flat map is simply an accurate representation of the flat world. I can hear someone saying that it doesn't really matter because Azeroth isn't actually real. There's no actual world that's bigger than the representation in the MMO, or that is a different shape than the simulation. I do, however, like to immerse myself in the world, and while I'm in it, imagine a more realistic scenario, one where it really is a globe with all the right astronomical results of that. And that isn't reflected very well in the game. By looking at what we do actually have, we ironically have a very good example of what we'd be seeing on Earth if it really was flat. Which is, to me, sitting in the topic of Warcraft and Starcraft and Elder Scrolls most of my free time, the best proof we can have that Earth isn't actually flat. If you enjoyed this little bit of a different video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and if you know any flat earthers who play World of WarCraft, make sure to direct them to this video. I do love reading aggravated flat earther comments. They were never really addressed at me so far, but it's always so entertaining to see people being so aggravated about something so stupid. Anyway, and if you don't know any flat earthers who play World of Warcraft and want to support the channel, I don't have a Patreon, but I do have a Ko-fi page, which should be linked in the video description below. For now, this will be all, and I hope to see you next time.